The bell above the diner door gave a soft, familiar jingle. It was the kind of sound many of us remember from Saturday mornings long ago. A small-town diner, red vinyl booths, the scent of coffee drifting through the air. On that quiet afternoon, a tired-looking man stepped inside. His name, at least for that day, was Daniel Reed. His hair was uncombed. His shirt was worn thin at the collar. There was a small scrape along his cheek, as if life had brushed past him a little too roughly. He looked like someone who had been walking for miles, carrying more than just the weight of the road. But Daniel Reed was not who he appeared to be. In another world, a world of tall glass buildings and polished boardrooms, he was known as Jonathan Whitmore, a billionaire, a man who could buy almost anything. Almost. He had built companies from nothing. He had shaken hands with governors and investors. Yet somewhere along the way, something inside him had grown quiet. He missed something he couldn't quite name. So he had decided to disappear for a while, to step outside his world, to see what remained when the money, the tailored suits, and the applause were stripped away. He chose a small town 2 states from home, a place where no one would recognize his face. And that is how he found himself standing in that diner, hands slightly trembling, not from cold but from uncertainty. In the third booth by the window sat a woman and her young daughter. The woman looked to be in her early 30s. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a loose ponytail. There were faint smudges on her light gray t-shirt, the kind that come from long hours and hard work. But her eyes were steady, kind, alert. Her name was Emily Carter. Across from her sat her daughter Lily, maybe 6 years old. Soft blonde hair falling gently around her shoulders, a pink shirt with a tiny stain near the collar. She watched the world with quiet curiosity. Daniel hesitated. The diner was nearly full. Only one seat remained open, the one across from Emily and Lily. He cleared his throat softly. "Ma'am, would you mind if I sit here? Everywhere else looks taken." Emily looked up. She took in his appearance, the worn shirt, the tired eyes, the scrape on his cheek, and she smiled. "Of course," she said simply. "There's always room." Lily scooted a little closer to her mother to make space, not out of fear, just to be polite. Daniel sat down carefully, as if unsure he belonged. For a moment, there was silence, the kind of silence that isn't awkward, just human. Steam rose from the plate Emily had just received. Meatloaf, mashed potatoes, green beans, simple food, the kind that reminds you of childhood kitchens and handwritten recipe cards. Lily's small hands rested near the edge of the table. Daniel glanced at the menu. He reached into his pocket quietly. He already knew what was there, not enough. He had planned it that way. He wanted to feel what it was like, to count every dollar, to wonder whether you could afford a warm meal. The waitress approached. "What can I get you, hun?" Daniel hesitated. "Just coffee, please." Emily's eyes shifted slightly. She understood that pause. Many adults in their 50s and 60s would recognize it too, the silent calculation, the pride that keeps a man from saying he's hungry. The waitress nodded and walked away. Lily looked at Daniel for a long moment. "You look tired," she said gently. Emily's eyes widened. "Lily!" But Daniel surprised them both by chuckling softly. "I suppose I am." There was something about the child's honesty that didn't sting. It felt pure. When the food arrived, Emily cut a small portion for Lily. Then she paused. She looked at Daniel's empty space on the table, just a white mug waiting for coffee. She didn't make a speech. She didn't ask questions. She simply slid her plate slightly toward the center. "Would you share this with us?" she asked quietly. "They always give me too much." Daniel blinked. In boardrooms he had negotiated billion-dollar contracts. He had commanded rooms filled with powerful people. But this small gesture undid him. "Oh, I couldn't." "You could," Emily said softly. "It's just food." Lily nodded very seriously. "Mom makes the best meatloaf at home. This one's almost as good." Daniel's throat tightened. He hadn't shared a meal like this in years, not one that wasn't arranged by assistants, not one without cameras or expectations. He picked up his fork. "Thank you," he said, and he meant it more deeply than he had meant almost anything in a long time. They ate slowly. Conversation came gently. Emily worked 2 jobs, day shifts at a hardware store, evenings cleaning offices. Lily sometimes did her homework in a back room while her mother finished up. It's not forever, Emily said calmly. Just for now. There was no bitterness in her voice, only determination. Daniel listened more than he spoke. He noticed the way Emily folded her napkin neatly, the way she wiped Lily's hands without being asked, the way Lily leaned against her mother's arm without thinking. Simple things, solid things. At one point, Daniel asked quietly, "Doesn't it ever feel heavy?" Emily considered the question. "Of course," she admitted, "but I had a grandmother who used to say, 'Hard seasons grow strong roots.' I hold on to that." Daniel stared into his coffee. Hard seasons, strong roots. He had spent years chasing growth in numbers, profits, expansion, influence. But he had neglected his roots. When the bill came, Daniel reached for his pocket again. Emily gently placed her hand over his. "It's all right," she said. "We've got it." He looked at her, truly looked at her. "You don't even know me." She smiled. "You look like someone who needed a warm meal." That was all. No suspicion, no lecture, no expectation of repayment, just quiet human decency. Daniel excused himself and stepped outside for air. The late afternoon sun stretched long shadows across the pavement. He felt something unfamiliar rising in his chest. Shame, yes, but also gratitude. He had given millions to charities, sponsored galas, written checks with many zeros. But when was the last time he had looked directly into someone's eyes and simply shared bread? He returned to the table. Lily was telling a story about a school art project. Emily listened as if it were the most important news in the world. Daniel realized something then. Wealth is not measured in bank accounts. It is measured in presence, in patience, in kindness offered without calculation. Before leaving, Daniel reached into his worn jacket. He pulled out a simple business card, not the polished corporate one, a private number. He slid it gently across the table. "If you ever need anything," he said carefully, "call this." Emily raised an eyebrow. "That sounds mysterious." He smiled faintly. "Maybe it is." She took the card, more amused than impressed, and tucked it into her purse. They said their goodbyes. Lily waved with both hands. "Don't be so tired next time," she called sweetly. Daniel laughed softly. "I'll try." Weeks passed. Emily forgot about the card, until one evening when the hardware store announced sudden layoffs, budget cuts, downsizing. Her name was on the list. She drove home in silence, Lily humming in the back seat. That night, after Lily fell asleep, Emily opened her purse searching for a receipt. The card slipped out. Daniel Reed, a phone number. She almost laughed. It felt foolish. But something in her remembered his eyes. She dialed. The phone rang once, twice, then a familiar voice answered. "Hello?" There was no diner noise now, no scrape on his cheek, no tired disguise, just calm authority. "Daniel?" she asked hesitantly. A pause, then gently, "My name is Jonathan Whitmore." Silence filled the line. "The man you shared your meal with," he continued softly. "I owe you honesty." Over the next hour, he explained everything, not with pride, not with theatrics, simply truth. Emily listened quietly. When he finished, she asked one question. "Why?" Jonathan answered slowly. "Because I forgot what matters." The following months brought changes Emily never expected. Not gifts, not charity envelopes at the door, but opportunity. Jonathan invested in the small town, opened a distribution center that prioritized hiring local parents, flexible hours, fair wages. Emily was offered a management role, based not on pity but on her proven work ethic. He funded after-school programs where children like Lily could paint and learn safely until their parents finished work. And he did something else. He began showing up. Not as a billionaire, but as a man willing to sit in a diner booth and listen. Years later, Jonathan would say that the most valuable investment he ever made was not in stocks or companies. It was in humility. In remembering that kindness from someone with little can restore someone with much. As for Emily and Lily, they never treated him differently after learning the truth. Lily once told him very seriously, "You were nicer when you were poor." Jonathan laughed. "Then I suppose I should stay that way in my heart, and perhaps that is the lesson many of us learn, especially as we grow older. We spend our early years climbing, building, accumulating, but somewhere along the path we discover that what sustains us is not success. It is connection, it is the warmth of shared food, the courage to offer help, the wisdom to receive it. In that little diner, under soft fluorescent lights and the smell of fresh coffee, a billionaire rediscovered his roots, not through loss, but through a mother's quiet generosity and a child's simple honesty. And if you listen closely, you can almost hear that diner bell again, a reminder there is always room at the table, always room for kindness, and sometimes the smallest plate shared can change everything.